Modern life, right? Modern life is just crazy. Like, have you ever noticed how everything nowadays is like a subscription service? Like, whatever happened to the days where you just did something or you just paid once for it, you know? I don't understand that. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Life is crazy nowadays. It's like this whole subscription model, it's like the death of ownership almost. It's like it used to be, when I was a kid, right? You know, back in like the olden times in the 90s, we'll say, in the 90s, right? When I was growing up. It used to be that if you bought something, you paid for it one time, right? Let's like video games, right? I'm sitting here playing a video game. It used to be that when you bought a video game, you got a physical copy of that game and you paid for it once. Even like, and this was before like MMOs came out, because that was really the first like subscription-based thing I ever saw for video games. Maybe there was other stuff before then, I don't know, but that was the first time I ever saw anything where you actually had to pay a monthly fee to play the game, and that was a very new concept that, I don't know how long it took for that to take off, but it took a while. But it's like not only is the ownership gone, but like the quality of what you're paying for has diminished as well. And you're really even paying more for less now, right? Because it used to be, if you bought a video game, like you would get like a physical box that it came in, and the box had artwork. You'd get a little manual with it. You would get the physical install disc, which also had artwork, and sometimes, especially, they even had things like collector's editions, right, where you would pay a little bit more money, but again, a one-time fee, right? You paid for this thing once, and then you owned it. It was yours, right? And then you would get like, maybe some artwork, or you would get like a little figurine or something to add value to the thing that you were already going to buy anyways, but just a little extra, cherry on top to make it worth the extra money that you're spending, because otherwise just buy the standard one, right? But it's not really the case anymore, right? I mean, yeah, like, okay, you get like digital stuff, right? Everything's digital now. Like, you get like an in-game skin, or you get like, a new title or something, or some kind of in-game item, but it's not real. It's digital. Like, and some of you might be like, oh, well, it's like it's real to me, right? Like, it's a digital asset in the game itself. And, I understand that, like, that's the way the world is moving, and that's kind of how things are now, to where you don't really get, like, tangible things now, but I don't know. It's hard. It's just hard for me to think that you're getting better value than you used to get when you used to get something that was tangible, right? You could actually physically place your hands on these things, and it was real, right? It was something that was a component in the real world that you saw with your own eyes, right? You felt with your own hands, and it wasn't just this digital thing. And a lot of you are probably like, oh, well, it's the labor that you're paying for. It's the developer's time. And yeah, I understand there's a skill in that. Like, that is a skill, right? I mean, that's something that with my current skill set, I wouldn't know how to create a digital asset. So I understand that there is some value there. It's not like there was no labor that was involved in that. But that's also a subjective thing, right? Because like what one person might consider a skilled task, it might be nothing to somebody else. And then it just comes down to I just really don't feel like you're getting the same level of value that you used to get for things, but you're honestly really being charged more, right? Because the one-time fee that you pay to just get access to the thing that you want, whether it's a game or like a service or whatever, like especially in the past 5 years, I mean, that cost has gone up, right? You're paying more now for less than you used to pay when you actually got a physical item you could physically put your hands on, right? And not just something that was just in a video game. And like even further to expand on that, so I mean, even if you get like some really cool, digital asset or something, you don't own that. And not only do you not own that, but there's going to come a day, like look at like Grand Theft Auto, right? Grand Theft Auto is a great example of this. Uh, there's going to come a time when you're not going to be able to play that game anymore because they're going to shut the servers down. So if somebody doesn't go out of their way to go through all the hurdles that go with emulating a game and then having a server to host this thing on, especially if it's an online game, or even if it's not, just somewhere they can physically host the media for you to get access to after the fact, well then that's gone forever. So it's in effect, it's like you really don't own this stuff anymore. You're just leasing it, for a monthly fee, to where you now don't even have access to this thing permanently. See, that's the really big kicker with me, is it used to be that when you bought a video game, you had access, provided the game was kept in good condition and you had a working medium to play this thing on. I mean, you basically had that game forever. If, let's say you bought like a PlayStation game, right? That's old, let me date myself here, PlayStation. But, let's say you bought like a PlayStation game and then you keep that game in good shape and you've got a working PlayStation and a TV to play it on. Well, as long as everything's being equal there, you can still play that game 20 years later, okay? It doesn't matter if the game is still in production or not. It doesn't matter if the company that made the game went out of business. As long as you've got the physical disc in a working condition and you've got the technology to make this thing run, you can still have fun and enjoy that game 20 years later, 30 years later, for the rest of your life, even if you keep it in working condition. You can't say that about digital assets. You just can't, right? Because you don't own that. That is, the company owns that, and you are in effect leasing that to be able to enjoy a tailored experience that you might get to like vote on and stuff for the lifespan of the game, but you're not actually going to get to own that. And that's kind of what I have a problem with, right? Is I don't like this new model of no ownership, and that's kind of the way I see the world going. Is especially with computers, right? And I'm somebody who knows a fair bit about technology. I mean, I've been employed in the IT industry for the better half of a decade, and so I've seen behind the curtain a little bit, and it just makes it to where you don't, there's no ownership anymore, and that's kind of the way things are going with computers and stuff, especially like even the computer hardware. I mean, I'm sure anybody that has anything to do with gaming, which I'm assuming you probably do if you're watching this video, it used to be like, if you bought a gaming computer, you upgraded it every so often, and then, you were good to go, right? Well, with the current, especially with like AI and everything now, the prices of the RAM and the hardware and all that stuff is just going through the roof, and that's probably only going to continue, right? And what I really think that's about, I mean, you can make the argument it's about like data centers and powering AI and stuff, and it is to an extent, but that's not the full picture in my mind. What I see is it's more about cloud services, right? It's more about locking people even further into this ownerless subscription-based model, to where you have to pay to get access to computer hardware, right? Because what the future is going to be is, instead of you owning a desktop computer or a laptop or whatever, you're going to own some like tablet or some kind of low quality, low hardware device that's going to have a cheap entry-level price, that you're going to then use this thing to pay somebody to use their computer hardware over a cloud-based service. So you won't even own the hardware that you're trying to game on or whatever you're trying to do, which is just going to further take away control from people. It's just going to further make it to where these companies that just want to steal everybody's data basically are just going to be able to do it while you're paying them for the privilege of having your data mined on their hardware that they own. So it's just a consolidation, really, of all the ownership, all the technology ownership from a literal hardware level, to make it to where us as the consumers, there's no more control. There's no more say on how this thing goes, and it's just kind of be one of those deals where, either you agree to their terms, or you just don't use the hardware or the application, or you just don't play the game or whatever. And for some people that you might be thinking, oh well, then just if you don't want to agree to those terms, then just don't use the service. But see, here's the problem with that. The problem is that, anybody who's worked in like a corporate environment in the past like 30 years basically should be pretty aware that the softwares and the technology that all of these companies used is pretty standardized. Like, it doesn't matter if you're working at, basically any of the Fortune 500 companies, or even like small to medium-sized businesses. It just doesn't matter anymore. They're all using more or less the same Microsoft products. They're all using the same Windows operating system. They're all using the same, HPs and Dells and whatever, and Cisco routers and all that stuff. Like, it doesn't matter, right? There are some exceptions. Yes, I'm aware of that. But we're not talking exceptions. We're talking what's the standard, okay? What's the average? And the average is most companies are using Windows PCs on HP or Dell hardware. Most companies are using Microsoft products, and in order for you to play ball at these jobs, or just to get any work done, even if you're like a freelancer, we'll say, right? There's ways around it, sure, but it's getting more difficult. And so it's like you are basically locked into using these softwares through one form or another, even if you don't directly work for the companies. Even if you're like a freelancer or a contractor or whatever, you still have to be subject to these mediums of technology, and that's the problem, right? Is when they get rid of that choice, they also get rid of the ability for you to have the ownership, and that's the problem. So yeah, I don't like that trend. I don't think that's a good thing. I think that is heading in the wrong direction, where more and more control is going to be consolidated into the hands of fewer and fewer people, which is just going to lead to, just bad outcomes, right? Can you name one time in history where somebody that had absolute control, did the right thing? There might be maybe one or two, but the vast majority of instances where an organization or an individual had absolute control, they used it for evil, right? For personal gain, and to subject and control other people to their personal whims. And you don't be so naive as to think that that's not what's happening here, because it is. And it's it's just a crazy world we live in nowadays. And it's just like, look at all these apps and stuff too, right? Like, that's one thing, man, that really, really grinds my gears, is how so many of these like apps and stuff that people use nowadays, they just feel like they were intentionally designed to be as frustrating as possible, and to just be as clunky as possible, and just, I don't know, it's just like, when I was younger, again, dating myself here, back in the 90s, early 2000s, it really felt like software back then was like, it was just designed to work better. It was designed to not be frustrating, and to provide a easy to understand end user experience that was designed with simplicity in mind. Where nowadays, it's like, just to freaking check your email, you have to go through like multiple layers of authentication. You have to verify, your phone number, your address, your last four of your social, like all this crap. And it's like, you're basically have to doing it like every time. Yeah, I know there's ways you can remember the device and stuff, and that's fine. But even then, it's like, oh, you changed your password? Oh, well, then let's send you through this whole rigmarole all over again. And, it just seems like just so many things nowadays are just designed with the intent to be frustrating, and they're designed with the intent to be time consuming, and to just make things overly complicated and overly engineered, when the simplest solution is often the best solution, right? If something is overly engineered and just like overly complicated, it's probably because it's not a good solution. And that's not the best way to do something. And I see so much of that in corporate America nowadays, is where so many, especially like technology solutions, are just over engineered, over complicated, just designed by people who just cannot or will not, that's debatable, but usually just people, these just like 105 midwit IQ people who just cannot abstract things to its simplest form and just create these systems that are just complex for the sake of complexity. And it's just, I never could understand that. I mean, I've had so many conversations with people that I worked with, like back in my stint in the corporate world. Wouldn't recommend it, by the way, but back in my little stint through corporate America, I worked corporate IT for a couple of years, and it was just like so many of my bosses were just these people that they would come up with a solution to a problem, and the solution just had all these unnecessary steps and just all this unnecessary complication, and it was like they thought that if they came up with a really complex solution or something, that made it look like they put in a lot of effort to their boss. Whereas if they came up with a really simple, efficient, effective solution, then it was like, oh, you didn't put enough thought into this. And it's like, no, it's like that. Like, see, I don't know if anybody's watching this as a developer, right? There's something in development called refactoring, right? And basically, what refactoring is when you take something that might work per se, like a piece of code or a program that runs and does what it's supposed to do, but it's overly complicated, and you're taking that back-end code and you're simplifying it to make it to where instead of having, say, 100 lines of code to do something, you simple it down to, say, 20 lines of code to accomplish the same thing, because it's more efficient, right? It uses less resources to more efficiently accomplish the same task, but in a better, more simplified way that removes all of the excess complications and all of the just unnecessary fluff that just doesn't need to be there and just kind of gums up the works, And I see so much of that, and especially in corporate IT, I see so much of that. They don't like it when somebody comes in there and says like, hey, you have this really complicated solution. Here's a more simple way to accomplish the same thing with less resources. And it's like they don't accept that. They don't. If it's too simple, then in their mind it's not good enough, right? There wasn't enough thought put into it. It's like it can't be that simple. And it's like, well, sometimes it is that simple, and maybe you're just not able to see that because you're only looking at this from like a technical perspective, or the amount of complexity equaling like a better solution. And that's just not a good way to look at things, right? You shouldn't look at something and assume that if it's something is more complex, then it's better. I would even go so far to say is, if you see something that you think is more complex, then it's actually worse, right? Because the best solutions are the simplest ones. The best solutions that have really been refined the most are the ones that have all that complexity removed and get to the heart of what the problem is, right? And solve something in the most efficient, most, resource, diminished way possible, right? To where you're using the littlest amount of resources to accomplish the most. And that comes with experience, right? If you come up with really complex solutions to stuff, chances are it's probably because you're not experienced yet enough to understand how to simplify something down to a more refined solution, or you may just not be very good at your job, right? You might just not need to be in that position to where if you can only come up with complex solutions, then you might not be very good at what you're doing. You might want to rethink your path in life, or put in some more work. I don't know. But I saw so much of that in my corporate role, and man, corporate America, that is just wow. Corporate America is just such a cesspool. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that just because something is a corporation that just instantly means like it's bad, or it falls into that category of like, big, evil Corp Central or greedy Corp Central or anything like that. That's not the case. Just because something's incorporated doesn't mean it's bad. But I can tell you that my experience with a lot of these corpos and these middle managers and these executive C-suite employees has been wholly negative. It's been a whole lot of just people that are just these policy buffs that don't really have critical thinking skills, but are great at memorizing things, and everything is like a textbook decision. And then when they see somebody who does have, like, especially if you're somebody at the bottom, right? It used to be, well, I say it used to be, I would like to think it used to be anyways, and the historical evidence suggests that it was at least more so the case at one time, that if you were somebody who started at the bottom, right, and you were like a really intelligent, hardworking person, people used to think, like, see an opportunity there, right? And they used to see, like, somebody like, okay, this person, if they can prove themselves in their role or whatever, they would fast track you, right? Because that was the point, to try to get the best people in the best positions. And you could probably make the argument that maybe it's kind of always been kind of gatekeepy. I don't know. It probably has been, but it's nice to think that at least there was probably some time somewhere in history where people that deserve to be in higher positions were fast tracked there because of proven performance, right? It doesn't really make a lot of sense if you have like a hungry, let's say you have like somebody in their early 20s, right, who's like clearly intelligent, hardworking, has a lot of motivation, maybe they've got a young family or whatever, or is just money hungry even, which there's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. And just, it doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind to intentionally burn that person out and keep them in a role where they're not being challenged and they're not being, they're not having the maximum value extracted from them that they could otherwise bring if they were in a position of a bit more responsibility, right? To me, that just doesn't make sense. Now, I understand, like, there is something to seniority and there is something to experience, and I don't discount that. Like, yeah, you do need to spend at least a year, maybe a year and a half, 2 years, in kind of an entry-level role to actually get a real feel for how the operations of a place you're working at works. I understand that, but keeping somebody in like an entry-level position for like 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, that's just, to me, that's counterproductive, right? Because those jobs at the top should be competitive. There should be no tenure for somebody that's making a 6-figure salary in an environment like that, unless they're like the owner or something. If you're in a position like that to where you're making the top wage, well, that job should be reevaluated every couple of years in my mind, to be like, is this person still performing? Are they still meeting the expectations? And if they aren't, well, then there should be turnover. Like, I don't know. I mean, as I say that, like, I guess I can see both sides of it. I can understand that, like, that is a disruptive thing, and that's another set of problems, but I don't know, man. You've got to leave incentive for people at the bottom to keep trying and to keep busting their butt, because if the incentive is a paycheck and then you get shoehorned in this position for doing too good of a job, which I've definitely been there. You do too good of a job at something and then you work yourself into a corner where, like, you can't get out of it, and then you just have to change companies, and that's a real thing. Like for sure, so many positions now, they have high turnover, right? Whereas, like, there's multiple reasons for that. I mean, there's no real reward for being loyal anymore, but a lot of these, especially entry-level jobs, they have high turnover. It's like, what, 2.5, 3 years is like basically the max amount of time that somebody will spend in one of those positions. And I mean, there's good reason for that, because the data pretty much clearly shows that you're going to make less money. You're going to have less career advancement if you stay with the same company for more than 3 years in the same position. I mean, that's not even my opinion. That's fact, right? That's the data clearly shows that people who stay in the same position for more than 3 years make less money than their counterparts who look for new opportunities roughly every 2 years. And then, like, I do think that that's kind of a diminishing return. Like, eventually you do kind of need to settle somewhere and gain some seniority, but you've got to make sure that the base level, like, compensation and the base level responsibilities are worth staying at, right? If you're just in like some help desk role or something, or just some like call center job or something, I mean, you're not really going to be challenged there. You're not going to grow there, not really, But and a lot of it does just come down to you and your ability to self-educate and self-learn. Because if you're relying on these companies to train you, you're going to be disappointed. I can tell you that. It's on you. It's all been outsourced, folks. It has all been outsourced. Yeah, crazy times, crazy. And it's like people want to talk about, it's just all this convenience nowadays. It's all the convenience. That's what's making people miserable. Everything is so convenient. It's like there's no meaning to a lot of stuff anymore. There's no struggle. There's no like satisfaction, I guess, that comes from these overly convenient things, and they just don't feel rewarding. They don't feel worthwhile anymore. So I don't know. That's the trap, isn't it? It's just being aware of all the little pitfalls that all these things bring you. Like, it makes you just a weaker person. It really does. Just to be a victim of all the convenience. Like sometimes that's okay. I mean, there is something to be said about like some things being more convenient, but I think a lot of it is just dumbing down, right? There's a difference between simplification and dumbing down, and I think that's something we've really missed as a people. Is that, again, we talked about refactoring earlier and like getting to the simplest solution, but it's like some things are not being simplified, they're being shitified. They're being dumbed down to appeal to the lowest common denominator. And I think if you're trying to sell something, then yeah, that's a good way to do it, because you want to appeal to the masses, right? And that means appealing to the lowest common denominator. But if you're trying to improve on something or empower somebody, then that's detracting from that, right? Like, again, simplification and dumbing down are two different things. It's a nuanced fine line that a lot of people might not be able to see through, but it's there, and you should strive to find that. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that is going to set you free. Is knowing the difference between dumbing down and simplification. It's two different things. So, that's my rant. It's more to come. Just kind of out here playing the game. We're all just playing the game, am I right? So that's my rant. More to come next time.